They declared me dead. I was standing by the stove when the phone rang. No thoughts, just routine, a sip of coffee on duty, and a glance at the screen. Notice, video message from Mrs. Langford. I was startled. The old lady is a neighbor with whom we lived next door in childhood, in the very house from which I was once thrown out like garbage. We haven't talked for 5 years. Why did she write? The message was strange. No greeting, no emotion. Just one sentence. I'm so sorry about your parents. I can't believe what I saw today. My heart jumped, and I immediately felt that dull pain under my ribs that I hadn't felt since the day of my exile. Cautiously, I clicked play. The video began with the sound of an organ and the slow approach of the camera to the pulpit in the church. At first, I didn't understand what it was. Then there was an electric shock. St. Albans Church, the one where my parents took me for Christmas. The familiar interior, gilding, stained glass windows. Only now there was a coffin on the altar, and next to it is a huge portrait of me in a frame decorated with lilies. I froze. Instantly. My pulse was pounding in my ears. In the video, my parents were standing at the lectern. Mom in black lace with pearl earrings played the role of a grieving mother. She held a handkerchief and gently dabbed at her tears, as if she were rehearsing. Dad was reading from a sheet of paper. His voice was trembling, but not from grief, but from tension, as if he was afraid that someone would hear his lies. Our daughter was difficult, but we loved her. We did everything we could. My blood turned to ice. What? I'm alive. I'm here. In his apartment. I'm standing barefoot on a cold tile and they're burying me. I rewound the video. I looked again. No, it's not a dream. It really was my face, my life. And now my death, which they played out in front of hundreds of witnesses. All my relatives, friends, even my piano teacher at school, all came to my funeral ceremony without even bothering to check if I was alive. Mom said in tears, "It was a terrible car accident. We couldn't bring her body. It was too late." A car accident? I didn't even drive a car. I dropped the cup. The coffee spilled in the floor, but I barely noticed it. My fingers were shaking so much that I could barely hold the phone. My whole body was cold, as if I was really lying in that coffin. I turned on the video for the 3rd time, then the 4th one. And I realized every second that it wasn't a mistake. This is not a misunderstanding. It's a betrayal, cold, calculating. I whispered out loud, "Why? Why did you do that? We haven't spoken in 3 years. Ever since they kicked me out of the house, accusing me of stealing $80,000 from my bank account. But it wasn't me. It was my younger sister, Elena, my favorite, the liar, the manipulator. When shortages in the family business surfaced, they needed someone to blame, and I fit perfectly. I was uncomfortable. I asked questions. I didn't close my eyes. That night, my mother whispered to me in the kitchen, "One spoiled daughter is better than 2." And my father added, "You are no longer part of our family." And everything. I left the next morning, without money, without explanation. 1. I've been trying to contact them. She wrote letters. She called, all without an answer. Even my aunt, my beloved Aunt Rachel, stopped responding. I was cut out of my life. But now, they walked on. They killed me. I rushed to the computer and started searching. I entered my name into the public records database. The system has booted up. My heart was thundering in my chest like a hammer. Date of death, July 16th. Cause, traffic accident. Status, dead. Next to it, the number of the death certificate. It was official, legally. The papers are fake, but they're decorated like real ones. I didn't exist anymore. I couldn't breathe. She was sitting in front of the monitor, holding onto the edge of the table. It wasn't just a rejection, it was an act of destruction. The tears did not flow. I was too stunned even for that. They buried me to forget, to erase it. But why? Why now? The answer came not from the news, not from the documents, but from where I had not hoped. Via social media. My sister's Instagram was open again, and I saw it. Wedding, a snow white dress a huge ring, fountains of champagne, dad with a microphone saying a toast. To the only daughter who has always brought us pride. My breath caught in my throat. They didn't just erase me, they replaced it. Dead, but not broken. I didn't sleep all night. I was lying on an old mattress in a rented room, staring at the ceiling, as if there might be a clue how to move on. The early morning city was bustling outside the window, but it seemed alien. Like everything that had surrounded me in recent years. People were walking, breathing in a hurry, and I'm dead. On papers, in families, in the memory of those who once knew me. They had a ceremony, flowers, speeches. I have a life that they stole. Only now did I know I'm not just an outcast. I'm a dead woman on the loose. But I was breathing. And with every breath, the pain turned into rage. I didn't know how I would do it, but I knew one thing. They would see what it meant to try to bury a man who hadn't said the last word yet. First, the documents. I took out a shoebox where I kept everything I had left. An old passport, an employment contract for a coffee shop in London, rental statements, a couple of scattered receipts from stores where my signature was. Few. Not enough to erase death from the databases, but enough to start a war for his name. The next morning, I went to the city center to get legal advice, which I found through a forum for migrants. A small room on the 4th floor of the business center, smelling of coffee and cheap furniture. The girl behind the counter looked at me with polite sympathy when I showed her my death certificate. Is this a fabrication? What is it? She asked, clearly trying to comprehend what she had seen. It's murder, only I'm still alive. She took me to a lawyer. His name was Thomas, and he was too young to sit at such a serious table. But his eyes were intelligent. He listened to me attentively while I laid out everything. The ceremony, the video, my sister Elena, and my mother's very phrase, "It's better to lose one daughter than both." Are you ready to go all the way? What is it? He asked when I finished. I looked straight into his eyes. I didn't come for justice. I've come for retribution. 2 days later, we started the process of challenging the death certificate and filed a fraud complaint. Legally, I could have been resurrected. But it took more than just a piece of paper to do this. It needed evidence, weighty, irrefutable. I started collecting the dossier, correspondence, photos, letters, anything that could leave electronic traces of my life abroad. I remembered names, dates, and looked through old photos to find something to show for it. And then there's my sister's Instagram. Each picture shows the life that was supposed to be mine. Traveling, meetings, expensive restaurants, people who once knew me. They were smiling, drinking champagne, building houses, without me, with my money. And here it is, the engagement video. Father into the microphone, the words coming out of his mouth with such confidence. Everything is for Elena. She has always been our pride. His pride. His daughter. What about me? Just a ghost lost in a strange city, in a strange body, in a strange past. I printed out the picture. I put it in a folder. She wrote a handwritten note at the bottom. No one forgets the dead if the dead come back. I barely ate. I didn't sleep. I immersed myself in my investigation as if my intensive care depended on it. And in a way, it was. If I don't get my identity back, they will win. And I can't let them win twice. One evening, walking down the street, I saw a church. Not the one where my funeral took place, but a similar one. An elderly woman was sitting on the steps with a scarf tied exactly like my grandmother's. I suddenly remembered how once when I was a girl I held her hand during the service. How smoothly she whispered, "You're stronger than you look, Maya." Then I believed it. And I believed it again now. At night, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not for the trial, for myself, for them, for everyone who has ever believed a lie. My name was Maya Dekua, and I was killed by my own family. Not literally, but in the very present. I was crossed out. I was buried. And now I'm coming back, not for forgiveness and for the truth. Resurrection Sunday morning began with silence. Not the cozy, homely silence that accompanies the first sip of coffee, but icy, almost sacred like before a storm. I was standing in front of the mirror, dressed in a black dress, a symbol of mourning, but not my own. I wasn't wearing any makeup or jewelry, only the cold determination in his eyes. I'm going to my own wake today. The place is still the same, St. Albans Church, where a couple of weeks ago my relatives staged a play in which I played the role of the dead without even going on stage. I'm going out today. Before I left, I double-checked everything. The folder with the documents was in the bag: passport, contract with the employer, bank transfers, tax reports, video from the funeral where my grieving parents told about my tragic death. The paper trail of my life that they tried to erase. All of this will be my armory. I went outside. The city breathed in the early Sunday air. Cars are rare, pedestrians are rare, but this particular morning was supposed to be the start of the storm. I called a taxi. "Where are we going?" the driver asked. I exhaled. "To the church." For his own funeral. He looked in the mirror, clearly thinking he had misheard, but he didn't ask any more questions. On the way to St. Albans, my heart sank. Cars lined the sidewalk, guests, women in black hats, men in gray coats, armfuls of flowers. Fake, covered with ribbons, with the inscription, "With love forever." I looked at them from the car window as if from behind the glass of an aquarium. Everything looked so touching, if you didn't know the truth. I stayed in the car. I waited until the last minute, while the last ones were coming inside, until the ringing of the bells announced that the ceremony had begun. And here he is, my moment. I opened the doors of the temple. She stepped inside. The sun cut through the gap behind me and illuminated the passage like a spotlight. Everyone turned around. Everyone. Relatives, acquaintances, those who carried flowers. Their faces changed from compassionate to amazed. Then the terrifying ones. Mom fell first, theatrically, palm to forehead, trembling lips. The father froze, a glass of wine in his hand, which slipped out and broke at his feet. Elena stood with a pale face and trembling hands. She clutched the pearl necklace as if it could protect her from the truth. I walked slowly. Every step echoed through the temple. I stepped forward. I stood next to the same photo, next to the coffin where, according to their version, I was lying. She picked up the microphone. "You're saying I'm dead?" But here I am. Not a sound. No one interfered. Maybe they didn't dare. Maybe they couldn't believe it. 3 years ago, you buried me. Not physically, but legally, emotionally, socially, you erased me to save yourself. But I didn't disappear. I lived. I was breathing. I worked. And I remembered everything. I opened the folder. I laid out the papers right on the altar. She turned to the people. These are the proofs, tax documents, lease agreement, bank transfers. I've been around for 3 years, and here is a fake death certificate, registered with a forged signature and allegedly issued abroad. I looked up. Chance didn't kill me. Greed killed me. My name, my life, my money, everything went to her. I pointed at Elena. It was she who transferred my trust fund to her name. Her parents helped her. And in exchange, we got a daughter, comfortable and manageable. And I was buried. People started whispering. The phones went up. Cameras. This wake turned into a news bomb. And I was standing in the epicenter. I didn't come to apologize. I've come to get my name back. I turned around and walked to the exit. From behind, there were sounds of commotion, shouts, and the priest's voice calling for order. And I walked without turning around. I paused on the threshold and turned around one last time. Thanks for the funeral. Now it's my turn to organize a trial. Retribution. I didn't feel any relief after leaving the church. There was only steel inside. No tears, no trembling, just icy determination. They had a funeral speech. I will have a verdict. The next day, I sat down in the lawyer's office, putting everything I had in front of him. This is not just a case of falsification, he said, flipping through the papers. This is a large-scale fraud, forgery, embezzlement, dissemination of false information. If everything is confirmed, they will have serious problems. I don't want revenge. I lied. He chuckled. Of course. We were the first to file a lawsuit to invalidate the death certificate. The court began the proceedings immediately. The case was a precedent. While the legal machine was gaining momentum, I met with a financial expert to assess the amount of damage. It wasn't just about the trust fund. While I was away, debts were closed in my name. Assets were written off, and documents that I had not seen were signed. They used my death as a business tool. Elena has opened her own fashion brand. The money she used to rent a studio, hire staff, and pay for marketing was from my grandfather's foundation, a foundation created for my education and future. When I saw her giving an interview to a glossy magazine, where she said with a smile that inspiration comes from tragedies, it took all my self-control not to smash the screen. I started living anew, but not in the sense of romance or spiritual awakening. No, I turned my daily life into a resistance headquarters. While my lawyer was sending the documents to the court, I was preparing a public statement. They tried to destroy me in reality. I chose to respond in the digital world. I made a video, without filters, without dramatic music. I was sitting at the table. I have the documents in front of me. My name is Maya Dekua. 3 years ago, my family declared me dead. I've told you everything. About a funeral without a body, about forgery of documents, about how my family took advantage of my death to enrich themselves. I'm not calling for hatred. All I ask is that you don't believe that people seem kind just because they smile in church. Some people make a business out of lies. I posted this video in 48 hours, 1 million views. On the third day, I received a knock from the editorial office of one of the largest news channels. We want to do an interview. Only if you show me the documents, I said. Absolutely. I was shown on TV in the evening, in prime time. I was sitting against the backdrop of the marble columns of the court, and my face was no longer hidden behind glasses and a coat. And there was a caption below, "A woman declared dead by her family returns to reveal the truth." And that's when the panic started. The family's lawyer sent an offer. Agreement of silence, $300,000 compensation, withdrawal of all claims. I was laughing. The laughter was long, hoarse, and came from the throat. "No," I replied. "They wanted silence, and I'll give them an echo." A week later, the court issued a ruling. The death certificate was a fake. Next is an order to verify all financial transactions related to my name. Mom is sick. Father went on vacation. Elena went live and sobbed. "I was under pressure," she said. "I didn't know it was that serious." Meanwhile, I was sitting in the kitchen sorting through my mail, which included an official summons to a court hearing on economic crimes. A fall. The court session was scheduled for 9 a.m. I arrived half an hour earlier in a gray coat with a neat bun without makeup. I didn't need armor. I was my own weapon. My parents came in late. My father was wearing an expensive suit, and my mother was wearing a black shawl as if she was still in mourning. Elena did not come. She was represented by a lawyer. I was sitting alone on the bench opposite. No relatives, no witnesses. Just me and the evidence folder. The judge studied the documents in complete silence. Then he looked at me. "Miss Dekwa, do you confirm that you are in good health and conscious?" "Confirmed, Your Honor." "Tell me, did you know about your own death?" Minus no. Officially, I found out about it from the email provider's system, but in fact, when I saw my own photo at a funeral in a church, the judge didn't even blink. "I've told you everything. How I was deleted from the documents. How the money was transferred to my sister's accounts. How silent they were when I tried to contact them. I provided copies of all transfers to the trust fund. A fake death certificate signed by a non-existent doctor. Comparing the date of my death with the date when the money was transferred to Elena's new company. And most importantly, I proved that at that moment I was living and working abroad. Legally, officially, verifiable. Elena's lawyer tried to turn the case into an emotional channel. It was a family tragedy. No one meant any harm. It was a misunderstanding. The judge interrupted. "Mr. Bryan, according to the information provided, your client gained access to the account through a power of attorney signed on behalf of the deceased. How exactly did she misunderstand that the person signing the papers wasn't dead?" There was tension in the hall. The next speaker was an expert from the tax service. "We have conducted an inspection. Accounts, assets, real estate, trust. Everything passed from Maya Dekwa to Elena and her parents within 6 months after the fictitious date of death. Are there any signs of coordination?" the judge specified. "No, Your Honor. The death certificate stated that there was no contact with relatives, that the cremation was carried out abroad, and the body was destroyed according to local laws. It's all made up. There was only one performance after lunch, mine." I got up, went to the lectern, and looked out into the hall. "I'm not here for the money," I said. "I don't want compensation. I want you to hear one thing." I stopped talking. She looked at her father, at the mother, to Elena's empty bench. "I've lived for 3 years with the idea that I'm not good enough for my family. And then I saw them burying me for money right in front of the camera. I showed you that very picture of me with flowers, with a black frame, with the inscription, "She is gone, but she remains in our hearts." I'm not dead. I survived. And I came back to show that the truth is not what is printed on a beautiful ribbon. The truth is me. I'm standing in front of you, lively, the real one. The court retired to a meeting. 40 minutes have passed. When they returned, the judge opened the case. The court recognizes that the death certificate was forged in order to gain access to the inheritance. All transactions based on it are considered invalid. The property is returned to its rightful owner, Maya Dekua. The court also refers the case to the prosecutor's office to initiate criminal proceedings on fraud, forgery of documents, and misappropriation of funds. The mother began to cry. My father turned away, but I just nodded. Freedom. After the trial, I left the building in complete silence. The flashes of the journalist clicked nonstop. Someone shouted, "Maya, how do you feel after returning from the dead?" I stopped, slowly took off my glasses, looked directly at the camera and said, "Free." To come back to life when you were buried is not just to cancel the paper. This is to relearn how to breathe again. I couldn't sleep for a long time. The music from the funeral, where I was a guest at my death, was still playing in my ears. 2 months later, I moved again, this time to a city where no one knew my last name. I took my grandmother's maiden name, Bastille. She was the first woman in our family to move to another city and open a sewing workshop on her own without anyone's help. I rented a small apartment in the attic of an old building with a view of the river. Every morning, I opened the window and watched the sunrise. No one knew who I was. No one called me a problem daughter. No one pretended that I didn't exist. One day, I received a letter. Paper, handwritten. The name on the envelope is Sam, my younger cousin. The only one who wrote then. "Maya, are you alive?" There was a short note in the letter. "I saw you standing in front of the whole church. You can't imagine how proud I am of you. Someday I want to be as strong as you. You've proved to everyone that the truth is more important than silence. Thanks for coming back. I've read these lines 10 times, then 10 more. And at some point I realized that now I have a goal. I started writing. At first, just notes, then the chapters, and then the book. They buried her alive, that's what I called her. I've told you everything about the family, about betrayal, about the fake death certificate that killed not only my identity, but also my faith in love, and about how I was resurrected. Without wreaths, without tears, with only one weapon, the truth. A year later, my book was published, a modest print run, an independent publishing house. I didn't think it would be read, but she broke up. On the internet, women from different countries wrote to me, "This is my story too." I read one of these letters late at night. No one officially buried me, but I died for my family when I refused to be comfortable. Thank you for saying that out loud. And then the invitation came. International Festival of Women's Literature. Panel, True Stories of Survivors. And I went on stage, not like a lost daughter, not like a family accounting mistake, and as a woman who went through her own death and survived. There were hundreds of women in the hall, with different faces, skin color, accents, but all I saw in their eyes was understanding. I told my story with a tremor in my voice, but firmness in my heart. And she ended up like this. "If you've been silenced, you don't have to be quiet. If you've been crossed out, you can rewrite yourself. I died according to their version, but she was resurrected in her own way. The audience stood up. They were crying. They applauded. And I stood there knowing, now I really live. The final portrait of Maya by the window. Smile. In her hands is a signed copy of her book. And the title says, For All Who Survived, and for those who are still struggling.